super. That was something that caught my eye, especially the fact that the party would support an increase to contributions to 15%. So what's the argument with that one? And you might not know, as I said, it's putting a bit of this on, you know, you on the spotlight here, but it's an interesting policy.
Yeah, I think it you know, it's a direct result of seeing people who are retiring on their superannuation benefits, and basically it's not lasting. You know, our life expectancy is getting longer, and you know, the cost of living is always going up. So my understanding of that policy is that we're looking at what is potentially a problem of a whole raft of future retirees effectively running out of money, or not, you know, not having the income that they need to survive, and you know, they'll be forced to come back onto the pension. So it's a simple, you know, future protection mechanism that we're looking at.
And has there been much thought through, and I know that it's very difficult for micro or minor parties to have the funds and resources to do the proper modelling, and this is where I think that the majors will always have the advantage, and perhaps people don't really quite understand why smaller parties are at a further disadvantage, is because, you know, in order for me to, if I asked to ask you, which I want to ask you, well, where's the financial modelling in that, and how, you know, what impact is that going to have to businesses, and blah, 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 which are all fair questions to have.
Sure.
But in order for you to answer it, you would have to have a lot more funding than you would ever have, you know, access to, and so further the separation between the micros and the major.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Has there been any sort of look into that beyond, you know, we want to help the recipients of that superannuation increase, but, you know, if you're a small business and, you know, things are tough for you as it is, increasing, what is that increase in superannuation going to mean for them? It was the first instinct that I had when I saw that policy. So it's hard for me to probably even ask you that question, but that was my instinctual is, well, what sort of economic impact would that have? So perhaps instead of forcing you to answer that, because it's tricky, maybe it's a matter of what have you realised, or what has been the challenge in accessing information. You know, like the government has the Treasury, the government has regular meetings with the Reserve Bank. Your party would not. So have you found this as being a real obstacle, and how do you think we could maybe address that?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, being the minor party that we are, we've practically got no money. So it's 100% volunteer. The policies that we have formed have been put together by, you know, intelligent people who, you know, there's a lot of people in our party who are public servants. So they, you know, and through the course of their own duties, they've, you know, picked up a lot of this information. It's a lot of people taking a lot of time to read things in their own time out of personal interest. And that's how we develop policy. And it's effectively, you know, if we see an issue, we don't know much about it, we go away and we read all that we can, and we share it between the groups who are involved in policy development, and put it together in the best way we can. Obviously, we don't have access to, you know, paid analysts, economists, these type of things. So, you know, that question, that perennial question, how are you going to pay for it? That's something that we do try to address in as much as our capacity allows us to do so. But yeah, it's a massive disadvantage. We don't have a single paid position within the party. And if we did, then perhaps we could, you know, devote some time to addressing that question. How do you pay for it?
And yeah, and that's, I guess, you know, because it would be unfair for me to ask that question without highlighting, I think, for people that the reality is it's running a small party. You can do your best, but it's usually off volunteer dedication, and it's tricky. So at least if you've got these questions for the minor parties, or anyone that you're watching, do bear that in mind, because you know, and even then, even the two majors, largely a lot of the stuff that they say come election time hasn't necessarily been proven out. It doesn't always have the backing, and also a lot of the promises they know they'll never pass in the House. So they make these promises knowing that they'll have the excuse to say, it was Labor's fault we didn't get it through.
Yeah,
but they actually know that it never would, but it sounded nice. And I think that's a really important takeaway for people
absolutely. That's why I think it's so important to understand who it is that you're voting for, the individual,
right.
The individual candidate. So understanding what their values are and what's going to inform the decision making. That's a critical part.